the summer of 2017, I traveled up to Quebec where I visited Montreal and Quebec City for an amazing experience. During that time, I made many new friends, learned new and interesting information about Quebec, and saw some amazing things. Also, while I was in Quebec, I took some observations on my guiding question, which is how have different cultures influenced the desserts eaten in Quebec? While in Quebec, my tour director told us a lot about how Quebec had been originally founded. In 1534, a French explorer, Jacques Cartier, visited the area that is now Quebec and claimed it as territory of King Francois I of France. It became known as New France. Soon many people from France moved to New France and colonized it, but when people move, their culture comes with them, so the French culture became the first culture of New France. The word culture means way of life. A person's culture includes the language they speak, the clothes they wear, the religion they follow, and the food that they eat. As time went on, more and more people moved to New France or Quebec. As many cultures came to Quebec, there started to be changes in what the people in Quebec ate or how they dressed. Those many cultures influenced what was being done in Quebec, and although Quebec kept parts of its original culture, it changed a little bit. When I traveled to Quebec, I truly began to see how different cultures can affect one culture and change it. I especially noticed it in the food that I ate and the desserts. On the first day, we visited Marchand Tong in Montreal, which is a market that sells fresh food that is eaten in Quebec. At the market, I saw not only what I would expect to see at a market in Quebec, maple syrup products, sandwiches, and sugar pies, but I also saw Italian sorbet, crepes, and baklava. Also at the market, there were very many French desserts such as macaron, crepes, tarte au citron, and chocolate mousse cake. I assume that the reason there were so many French desserts is because it was originally the French that had colonized Quebec. One of the desserts that I was very surprised to see at the market was the baklava because those are originally from Middle Eastern and Greece. I also saw some American cherry pies and cheesecake at the market. On the third day of the trip, we visited Chinatown in Montreal where there was a store that sold steamed buns with a variety of fillings including sweet and savory. During lunch, I visited a bakery that was called Juliet and Chocolate. At the bakery, there were crepes, chocolate popsicles that you could add toppings onto, many different types of brownies, tiramisu, mini s'mores cake, mini chocolate cake, and a raspberry dome cake. At first, I was very surprised that there were so many American desserts in a bakery in Quebec, but then I realized that since America is so close to Quebec, American desserts probably influenced the desserts eaten in Quebec, and it would be normal to have brownies in a bakery in Quebec. There were also crepes, which I expected since they were from France, and tiramisu, which is from Italy. We then traveled to Quebec City, where we went to a sugar shack and had some maple taffy or kir d'érable. This I learned is a Canadian dessert where very hot maple syrup is poured on ice and then rolled up using a popsicle stick. It tasted very good, but it also showed me that although Quebec culture has been impacted by other cultures, it still has parts that remain the same. After a few days in Quebec City, I began realizing that there was not as much of an influence on the Quebec culture by other cultures in Quebec City as there had been in Montreal. I suspected that it was because of the fact that Montreal was a much larger city than Quebec City. The population of Montreal is 4.06 million, while the population of Quebec City is 500,000. When there is a larger amount of people living in a city, there are also more cultures, which is probably the reason that the desserts in Montreal had been influenced more by other cultures than in Quebec City. While I was researching, I found out on the Canadian Encyclopedia it says that Quebec City has managed to maintain a greater culture homogeneity than Montreal. This further helps show why there had been a greater cultural variety of desserts in Montreal than in Quebec City. When I got back home, I began to realize that it was not only in Quebec that different cultures influenced the desserts, it was all around the world. In Columbus, there is a German village where you find German desserts, an Italian village where you find Italian desserts, but even in any store or bakery, there are a variety of desserts from different cultures. I also realized that larger cities often have a greater variety of cultures, therefore you are more likely to find a greater variety of desserts from different cultures in big cities like New York City or Chicago rather than in Springfield, Illinois. During my trip, I have learned a lot about the culture in Quebec and how other cultures have affected it. It has truly helped me realize how important a person's culture is and how it can change its surroundings. As a result of this trip, I have become much more interested in the places that I visit and the cultures that I see. I will continue to notice the influences that cultures have on other cultures wherever I travel to.